Hi guys, recently I've been working on a few bits of terrain, including some docks and some other bits, and mostly they've been 3D printed, like this fabulous bookstore that I've just put together. And you can get a lot of cool things from there, so 3D printing nowadays, and it would mean that I'd probably not buy much more scenery like this anymore, physically. But when I was sorting some stuff out in my hobby room here, I did come across this.
Gruffy Crow.
So this came from a King Games Dunkledorf Kickstarter a little while back. And it was one of the things that was used in some of their promotional material, and I actually did really want one. So, let's have a look at it. This is the Svens bitter stand, and it's exactly the sort of thing I've been building recently. And basically we've just got two sort of uprights, and then like a cross bar, which doesn't slot into anything, so I guess you just glue that on. And I think that's going to match up with my sort of 3D printed stuff quite well. It's similar sort of height. So that's going to look good. Detail wise, this is probably, I'm not for definite sure, but it could be almost a little bit crisper than my 3D printer could possibly manage. Look at some of these stitches and things. I suspect looking at it, this was a digital file at some point, so it'd be interesting to try and find out if I could get any crisper than this. But having seen some of the ArcWorld stuff in the past, I think with a very professional 3D printer and the right mold making, you can actually improve on a sort of a standard 3D printer like mine. So yeah, this is a very impressively crisp cast, but there is a bit of miscast under there. I said that looks deeper than it should do, but that might be right. And then we've got a sort of slightly uneven saw mark here. Looks like they've almost used a bandsaw or something to separate this from the block of resin it was attached to, but not very evenly. So that's going to take a little bit of work to clear up. These should be fairly easy to remove from the sprue. I've got some nice sharp cutters here. That's already come away, so that's fine. So this is the longer one, so I'm going to put this in here, and then that should glue on the front. Now, I don't know what about this. Put that there maybe. Also, as part of the Kickstarter, I did get various little bags, bits and pieces of sort of scenery decoration, which I'm probably not really going to use so much. So I dug through and I found an empty mug, what appeared to sort of be a beer bottle looking bottle, and a couple of full foamy beer mugs that I can place on the front of the stand. They're all going to need a little bit of filing down the bottom to get them to sit nice, and that just adds a little bit more sort of decoration to the whole thing. I will base this up, so I'll give it a little sort of MDF sort of base like this, and I'll probably add in, maybe not this one exactly, but I'll probably add in a barrel or two. I've got this printed one, or I've got some plaster ones here, just to add a bit of size to the whole piece, and to kind of, you know, where's he getting his beer from. So I'm going to get this all cleaned up, got all the little sort of flash and mould marks and anything else I can find tidied up and glued together, and we'll take another look. Okay, so we've got it all built up. We've got the beer cups on with the empty one facing in and the ones facing out, put the little sign on. It was a little bit tricky to get this all sort of lined up the way I wanted and get the posts. They're not super snug in their posts, so I had to sort of hold it while it was all drying. But I'm pretty happy with the way it's gone together. I've also sorted out the bottom a little bit, and then I've gone and created this. So this is just a bit of old cut off from a MDF kit I had kicking around, but I've sort of roughly cut it so it sort of covers the bottom of this with a little bit of leeway, and that is just so it helps it, because that's a little bit flimsy. When we get it on the board, that'll help it stand up, as well as I can put a little bit of grass and stuff around the outside and sort of help it bed in, and we can attach this barrel. So I've roughly cut this out so far, and I'm just going to take this over to the Dremel and neat it up with a bit of a bevel. Something a bit like that, and then I'm just going to do the final finessing with an emery board, and just make sure the bottom's all nice and neat, so it sits flat against the table. And I'm going to glue the whole thing down. Barrel on. I think I might remove a little bit more off the edge there. That's a bit better. So next up is the PVA and the sand. And we're just applying this with a cocktail stick, just all the way around the bottom here. Being careful not to get too much on the wood. And where this little foot didn't meet the ground very well, I'll put a bit of an extra thickness of glue on there, and that'll help the sand build up and hide that. And this will soak into this MDF quite nicely. In fact, if you put it on too thin, it'll just soak straight in straight away, especially on these exposed sort of furry areas. Which is one of the reasons why I prefer using the MDF to plastic, because once this sand's on, it's not going to go anywhere. Whereas the problem with using like plastic for bases is that sometimes all your sand can peel off in one big sheet. Alright, pop that in there. We'll leave that a little while for it all to amalgamate through. And then we'll give it an undercoat in Halford's Grey Primer, like I've done with these table and chairs. And here it is all undercoated, looking nice and crisp. Well, I could have done a better job on that side, but I think there's a layer there. Pretty happy with that. So I'm going to paint this in my normal wood colours, which I always start in Idrim Flesh from P3, which is getting quite hard to get hold of these days, but I've got some anyway. And I'm going to use this makeup brush just to get into all of those nooks and crannies and cover this whole thing nice and quick. There we go, something a bit like that. So next up we're going to go Sandry Dust on a nice generous dry brush all over all that. And then I'll give it a Agrax Earthshade wash, and then I might do a little bit more Sandry Dust, and that should hopefully bring all the wood grain and make it look nice and wooden, and make everything pop. Okay, so now I've got all the layers on the wood, more or less happy with that. I might put something to take a bit of that shine off, a bit of Lamian Medium or something maybe. And I've started with some of the other colours. So this is Nocturne Green and McCrag Blue, both of which I'll be lightening up a couple of shades. But I'm going to kind of use that as their sort of brand. I'm considering painting this barrel stripy actually with the colours as a kind of, just to really draw your eye to this as a little piece. But already I think it's going to be quite a striking bit when all this is lighter and we've picked out a few more details. So now I'm going to go around, lighten these up and add some Iron Warriors anywhere where there's sort of nail heads and sort of bracings and around the barrel and everything like that. And pick out all those silver parts. Even these tankards at the top here and some of the parts on these little tankards. Pretty happy with that. And I did the barrel like I was saying. I'm happy with the way that came out. Gives it a bit of a sort of roll up sort of theme. Pretty happy with the way this is shaping up now with the metal on. I'm going to go around with a bit of Null Noil and just sort of pin line some of these areas and just try and bring out sort of some separation between a few of these colours, put some shadows in and obviously shade the metal a little bit, and then I will highlight the metal with something a bit brighter. This was the Iron Warriors, which is about as dark as I've got metal wise, but I think it works really nice for like the tankards and things. Also in the last stage I did actually just put a couple of layers of browns on the mid brown and then like an ivory on the ground here as well to try and bring that up a bit. Okay, that's the Null Noil, and I've used it all over the barrel because I wanted to bring those grains out. I might pick out some of the especially on the blue, but actually I'm kind of liking how worn that looks now. He's kind of done wonders on this little shield, and in general I've just thrown a few shadows in as well as shading the metal. So I'm happy with that. It's going to take a little bit of time to dry. But next up we're going to start on this parchment and the beer foam, and then we're pretty much done. So for both of those I'm going to use my trusty Menoth white base to start with, I think, and we'll do a couple of thin coats on those and then highlight them up with the highlight. Okay, so the metals have been highlighted. We've painted the little poster, we put some text on, obviously garbage from close up, but tabletop level that should look pretty good. Done the little wine bottle, tried to do a little label, messed that up a little bit. Once again, distance clearly is something. Pretty happy with that. Gone around and done a little nails so they kind of stand out a little bit. Do you know what? I'm happy with it. Looks pretty good. So, finishing touches, I'm just going to add all the sort of tufts and grass and things that I do to sort of a model out of this army, because that'll blend it in with the table that I'm going to be using it on most, I think. Got a tuft here and I've really rammed it into this crack, so not only will that really seat that in, that's not going to go anywhere now. These are like self-adhesive, but also it looks like it's sort of growing out through the crack. I think that'll do for tufts. Probably going to leave this little bit bare because that's kind of where people would stand to get their beers. Same on the back. but I think I'll just throw a little bit of grass in. Just going to use my cocktail stick, smear some on there. If you've never done static grass like this, but you have done glitter, who hasn't done glitter? Basically the same principle. Just going to take some clumps of this, jab them in, shake off the excess, and then I'm going to give it a bit of a blow, which will help stand this up on end. Something a bit like that. You can get special applicators for this stuff that I'm sure would stand it on end even better, using sort of static, but I don't really have room for one, or I don't think they're necessarily required. And I think we are done. Really liking the way that came out. I threw together just another barrel on its side this time. It looks more like you can serve out of it, and did a similar base, sand and everything. So these go quite nicely together, but they're still quite flexible. And then depending on what game I use it for, because obviously it's just terrain, we've got a human bartender that can work that quite nicely. Or freshly painted, I have a hair bartender who looks equally good tending this bar. And this is what it looks like out on the table with a couple of the other stalls that I've finished so far. And that's all for this video. Please let me know what you thought down in the comments. Maybe subscribe for more. And as ever, thanks for watching. Bye.